The air inside Giovanni's was thick enough to choke on. It was well past midnight, probably closer to 1 in the morning, and the main dining room had thinned out. But this was not the main dining room. This was the mezzanine, the section reserved for men who did not like to be seen, but demanded to be felt. My feet ached inside my black, sensible shoes. I had been on duty for 10 hours, maybe 11, and the adrenaline of the dinner rush had long since faded, leaving behind that familiar, bone-deep exhaustion. I clutched the silver tray against my hip, the starched linen of my apron stiff and unforgiving. The quiet up here was different from the quiet of an empty room. It was a heavy silence, punctuated only by the low murmur of voices from the corner booth and the clink of ice in heavy crystal glasses. Even the busboys moved differently up here, gliding on the plush carpet, avoiding eye contact. You could feel the money, yes, but you could also feel the danger. It clung to the damask wallpaper like expensive cologne. I knew tonight was different. You develop a sixth sense in this job, a tightening in the gut that tells you to keep your head down. Tonight, my gut was screaming. The shift happened just as I was clearing plates from a two-top. It was not a sound, it was a pressure change, like the air being sucked out of the room just before a storm breaks. The hushed conversations at the bar downstairs did not just quiet, they ceased. I saw Angelo, the maitre d', a man who never broke a sweat, visibly straight in his spine. His usual easy smile vanished, replaced by a mask of profound, almost fearful respect. Then he walked in. Vincent Caruso. I had never seen him in person, only in grainy newspaper photos or in whispered descriptions from the other girls in the locker room. The pictures did not do him justice. He was tall, but it was not just his height. It was the way he occupied space, as if the air itself bent to his will. He was dressed in a suit that was a deep charcoal gray, so dark it almost looked black in the low light. It was a custom piece, tailored to perfection, probably costing more than I made in 6 months. It hung on a frame that spoke of disciplined strength. He was not a bulky man, not a brute, but he moved with a lethal, fluid economy. No wasted gestures. His hair was dark, precisely cut, with just a touch of silver at the temples. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic lines, a face that could charm a senator or condemn a man to a concrete grave, all before dessert. He was not alone. 4 other men flanked him, all large, all wearing the same expression of bored vigilance. They were his shadow, impassive and watchful. Their eyes scanned the room, missing nothing, cataloging exits, faces, and threats. They were the muscle. He was the mind. But it was Caruso who held the room captive. His presence was a physical weight. The air grew colder. My breath hitched, caught somewhere in my throat. This was the man they whispered about, the man who owned half the city and held the other half in a grip of fear. The man they said was ruthless, a ghost who left trails of blood but never a fingerprint. Angelo glided toward them, his movements smooth but tense. "Mr. Caruso, it is an honor. Your table is ready." Caruso's expression did not change. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and swept past Angelo, moving toward the grand staircase that led to the mezzanine. He did not look at anyone, yet he seemed to see everyone. My heart began to hammer. There were only 3 occupied tables on the mezzanine, mine, a political fundraiser that was winding down, and the corner booth, the largest one, the one shrouded in shadow, overlooking the rest of the establishment, the one they were heading for. Angelo followed them up, his face pale under the dim lighting. He saw me standing by the service station, tray in hand. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He hurried over to me, keeping his voice low. "Grace," he whispered, his voice tight, "you will be taking care of Mr. Caruso's table tonight." My stomach turned to ice. "Angelo, I thought Marco is suddenly feeling unwell." Angelo cut me off, his eyes darting back to the booth where the men were settling in. "It is you. Only you. Do you understand me? Be polite, be quick. Do not speak unless spoken to." "Yes, Angelo, My voice was barely a whisper. "And Grace," he added, grabbing my arm for a brief second, his fingers digging in. "Be invisible. Be invisible. That was the job. But how do you remain invisible when the most dangerous man in the city is sitting in your section? I knew the rumors. Everyone did. They said he was brilliant, They said he was cruel. They said he could order a man's death as easily as he ordered a glass of wine. And now, I had to ask him if he preferred sparkling or still. I watched them settle in. They moved as a unit, surrounding him, insulating him. Caruso took the seat facing the room. He always faced the room. I walked back to the station, my legs feeling like jelly. I picked up a water pitcher, the heavy silver cold against my sweating palm. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady my heart. I told myself it was just another table, just another rich customer. I lied. I walked toward the booth. Each step on the plush carpet felt like I was wading through wet cement. The air around them was static, heavy with unspoken power. The men watched me approach. Their eyes were dead, flat, assessing my hands, my face, my every move. I focused on the table, on the empty glasses, on anything but the man at the center. I reached the edge of the dark wood. The silence was absolute. "Good evening, gentlemen," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin, reedy, like a stranger's. "May I offer you some water?" I began to pour, my hand shaking so slightly I prayed they could not see. I filled the glasses of the men flanking him first. They did not acknowledge me. I was furniture. Then I came to him, Vincent Caruso. He was watching me. His eyes were not dark, as I had expected. They were a startling, clear gray, like a winter sky. They were intelligent, analytical, and they seemed to look right through me, peeling back the layers of my cheap uniform, my exhaustion, my fear. He watched my hand as I poured his water, and I felt the heat of his gaze like a physical touch. I finished and pulled the pitcher back, keeping my own eyes downcast. "Thank you," he said. His voice startled me. It was not a growl. It was not a whisper. It was deep, smooth, and laced with an educated accent that spoke of old schools and older money. It was a voice that commanded, but did not need to shout. It sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with fear, and that realization terrified me even more. I was about to ask about drinks, to retreat into the safety of the script, when he spoke again. "Tell me," he said, leaning forward just slightly. The movement was casual, but it drew all the energy in the room toward him. I froze, pitcher in hand. "Sir," he looked at me, really looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in those gray eyes. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You look smart," he observed, his voice still quiet, yet it carried across the table with perfect clarity. His men stiffened. One of them, a bulky man with a broken nose and a thick neck, looked ready to intervene. I recognized him from hushed kitchen gossip. Bruno, Caruso's enforcer. He looked at his boss, confused. Caruso lifted a single, manicured finger, just a fraction of an inch, and Bruno relaxed, though his eyes remained fixed on me, hard and cold. "I have a question for you," Caruso continued, steepling his fingers on the table. "I'm always looking for new perspectives. This city is full of consultants. Everyone has an opinion, but they are often so boring." My mind raced. What was this A-test, A-game? This was a lion playing with a mouse. He was bored. He was curious. He was exercising his power in a way that was both subtle and suffocating. He gestured to the small, silver name tag on my apron. Grace, a lovely name. He said my name. It felt like a brand, a claim. "Tell me, Grace, you have any financial advice for me?" The question hung in the air, absurd, surreal, and incredibly dangerous. It was a joke. It had to be. The men at his table clearly thought so. The man, Bruno, let out a low, humorless chuckle. "I hear experts like you," Caruso said, his gaze pinning me to the floor, "can often help guys like me. We are just simple businessmen, after all." The silence that followed was deafening. This was a minefield. A joke from a man like this was never just a joke. He was toying with me. A yes would be arrogance, an A. A no would be dismissive. A nervous giggle, I felt, would be fatal. I had to answer. Silence was not an option. I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I locked my knees to keep them from buckling. I thought of my textbooks hidden in my locker, my night classes at the community college, the endless spreadsheets I studied until my eyes burned. I thought of the condescending patrons who treated me like I was deaf and dumb every single night. And an anger, cold and sharp, suddenly cut through the fear. I lifted my chin and met his gaze. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. "Mr. Caruso," I said, my voice quiet but remarkably clear in the tomb-like silence. "I think a man in your position has financial advice more than covered." Bruno relaxed beside him, a small, dismissive smirk touching his lips. He thought I had backed down. I did not back down. "But," I added, and the smirk on Bruno's face vanished instantly. Caruso's eyebrows rose, just a fraction. "My only advice," I continued, the words coming out before I could stop them, "speaking generally, of course, is that even the most diversified portfolios can suffer from operational inefficiencies, hidden leaks, things that look like rounding errors but are anything but." I paused, my heart slamming against my chest, but I held his gaze. It is easy to lose track of the small percentages when you are dealing in large volumes, and the small percentages, sir, they always add up. Dead silence. The air turned to glass. I had said too much. I had been bold. I had been stupid. I was a waitress. Talking about percentages and portfolios to Vincent Caruso, I should have just giggled and offered him champagne. I could feel the hostility rolling off his men. Bruno looked at me as if I had just spat on their boss. Caruso just stared at me. His face was blank, that small smile gone. He was assessing me, stripping me down to the bone with those winter gray eyes. It felt like an eternity passed, a whole lifetime where my entire future balanced on the edge of a knife. Then, slowly, he leaned back in the booth. A low, appreciative sound rumbled in his chest. It was not quite a laugh. It was a sound of surprise, of genuine appreciation. "Operational inefficiencies," he repeated, as if tasting the words. He tapped a long, elegant finger on the table, a rhythmic, thoughtful sound. He looked at his men, who were now utterly confused, and then his gaze settled back on me. He was impressed. I could see it. And that single fact, the fact that I had impressed Vincent Caruso, terrified me more than his anger ever could. "Grace," he said, the amusement clear in his voice now, "you will bring me an espresso, black. And my compliments to your manager. The service here is unexpectedly insightful." This was not the end of a long shift. It was the beginning of something I could never have imagined. My life, the simple, grinding life I thought I knew, had just tilted on its axis. The conflict had been set, a simple question and a bold answer. And I had the horrifying feeling that I would never be just a waitress again. My legs felt hollow as I turned from the table, my feet moving on their own accord, carrying me back toward the service station. The rich, plush carpet muffled my footsteps. "Be invisible." Angelo's voice was a frantic whisper in my memory, but it was too late. I had never been more visible in my entire life. I could feel his eyes on my back, a focused, tangible pressure that felt like the heat from a spotlight. I did not dare look back. I reached the gleaming brass and dark mahogany of the station, my hands moving on autopilot, picking up a heavy porcelain demitasse cup and its matching saucer. My fingers were trembling, but it was not just from fear. It was a strange, vibrating energy, the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline. I had just stood in front of a lion, spoken to it, and walked away. I stood by the espresso machine, the hiss of steam and the dark, bitter aroma of the beans momentarily grounding me. The machine itself was a gleaming Italian monstrosity, all polished chrome, and it probably cost more than my car. This place, Giovanni's, was a temple to excess. It was a palace of deep burgundy velvet, walls paneled in wood so dark it looked black, and massive crystal chandeliers that dripped light like captured diamonds. The air smelled of old money, of expensive perfume and truffles and rich, complicated sauces. It was a world built for one purpose: to insulate men like Vincent Caruso from the world that I came from. Giovanni's was not merely a restaurant, it was a recognized, neutral ground, a fortress of civility where billion-dollar deals were struck and political alliances were forged over plates of risotto that cost $300. It was the kind of place where senators and judges would laugh heartily with men they would publicly denounce the next morning. It was where fortunes were casually discussed, where whispers could move markets. And, I had always suspected, where lives were sometimes bartered. And I was just the girl pouring the water, a ghost in a starched white apron. My past was not something I shared in the locker room. It was not a story for casual conversation. I grew up in the East Side, a part of the city that the patrons of Giovanni's only saw from the windows of their town cars when their drivers took a wrong turn. It was a world of gray pavement, chain-link fences, and the constant dull roar of the elevated train. We lived, 5 of us, in a 2-bedroom apartment in a walk-up building where the heating was a suggestion, not a guarantee. I used to do my homework wearing gloves, my breath fogging in the air above my textbooks. My mother, God rest her soul, worked 3 jobs. She cleaned these very apartments, polished their silver, raised their children. She came home every night smelling of lemon polish and exhaustion, her hands cracked and raw. She told me to work hard, to be a good girl. She died when I was 19, buried in debt from a sickness that a man like Caruso could cure with pocket change. That was when I learned that hard work was not enough. Goodness was not enough. The grief turned into something cold and hard. It turned into ambition. I did not just want to survive. I wanted to win. I enrolled in the local community college, the one with night classes and professors who also worked day jobs. I chose finance. I chose it because it was the architecture of power. It was not just numbers on a page, it was the script for the entire play. It dictated who ate, who starved, who ruled, and who served. These men at Giovanni's, they thought they were masters of the universe, but they were just actors. The script was finance. I wanted to be the writer. I devoured textbooks on quantitative analysis, on derivatives, on portfolio management. I learned the language of the people who had crushed my mother without ever knowing her name. I would take that language and build a fortress with it. Working at Giovanni's was a painful, necessary irony. I served the men I wanted to become, or at least the men I needed to understand. I poured their 50-year-old scotch and listened. Oh, how I listened. I heard snippets of conversations about emerging markets, about hostile takeovers, about regulatory loopholes. They talked freely, because to them, I was invisible. I was furniture. I was a pair of hands holding a silver tray. I would stand in the shadows by the service station, my feet aching, and I would watch the low, intense conversations, the men in their tailored suits, the women dripping in jewels, all of them insulated from reality by a thick cushion of wealth. The air crackled with their power, their secrets. This restaurant was my real classroom. It was a microcosm of the entire financial world, predator and prey, risk and reward, all playing out over appetizers. The locker room downstairs was a different universe entirely. It smelled of cheap hairspray, disinfectant, and tired feet. It was small, cramped, painted a depressing shade of pale green, and brutally honest. You saw him, did not you? I jumped, clutching my clean apron. Molly was leaning against the dented metal lockers, already out of her uniform, rubbing her feet. Molly was my anchor in this place. She'd been working here 2 years longer than me. She was sharp, funny, and saw the world with zero illusions. She was saving up to open a bakery. Her dreams smelled like bread and cinnamon. Mine smelled like old paper and new money. Who? I asked, trying to sound casual as I fumbled with the combination on my locker. She gave me a look, the one that said I was not fooling her. Who, Grace, please? Mr. Caruso. The entire kitchen staff is acting like the Pope just walked in, or maybe the devil. I get them confused. I sighed, the tension of the last hour catching up to me, making my shoulders slump. He is in my section, Mall. Her eyes went wide. Oh, honey, no. Did Angelo really put you on that table? That man is a snake. He was fine, I said, the words sounding hollow and unconvincing even to myself. Fine, Grace. Fine is not a word people use for Vincent Caruso. They use words like ruthless and missing. Be careful. These guys are not like the usual finance jerks we serve. The rich guys, the bankers, they ruin your credit. These guys, they ruin you. I am always careful, I said, pulling my heavy microeconomics textbook from my locker. The weight of it was familiar and comforting. Molly sighed, shaking her head as she pulled on her worn sneakers. I do not know how you do it. You serve these sharks all night and then you go home and study how to be one. I am not studying to be a shark, Moll, I said quietly, tracing the spine of the heavy book. I am studying so I do not have to be the bait. She stopped rubbing her feet and looked at me, her expression softening with an understanding that made my throat tight. I know, kid. I know you want out of this, more than any of us. Just do not let this place swallow you, and do not let him see you. Not really. She motioned toward the stairs. You still have to bring him that coffee. I nodded, my stomach clenching again. All right, go. Be invisible. And text me when you get home. I mean it. Even if it is 4 a.m. I will, I promised. Her words echoed in my head as I picked up the small, steaming cup of espresso. Do not let him see you. It was too late for that. I had spent 4 years building a wall, a facade of the quiet, unobtrusive, slightly dim waitress. I hid my ambition. I hid my intelligence. I hid everything that made me me. Because in a world of rigid class distinction, a girl like me was not supposed to be sharp. I was not supposed to have thoughts on operational inefficiencies. I was supposed to be grateful for a 20% tip. But Vincent Caruso had seen me. He had looked right past the apron and the name tag and seen something else. He had asked me a question that pulled back the curtain, and I, in a moment of sheer, terrified audacity, had answered him honestly. I walked back to the table, the tiny cup rattling almost imperceptibly on the saucer. The conversation had stopped again the moment they saw me approach. They were waiting. I placed the espresso in front of him, on a clean napkin. My hand was steady this time. Your espresso, Mr. Caruso. He looked up. Those gray, wintry eyes met mine, and the brief, terrifying flash of amusement was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Something I recognized from my textbooks. Calculation, interest, a cold assessment of value. I had wanted to change my fate. I had a plan. College, a degree, an internship, a cubicle in a tall glass building. But as I stood there in the heavy silence of the mezzanine, I had the sinking, electric feeling that my careful, structured plan had just been blown to pieces. I had spent my life studying the rules of the game, and I had just caught the attention of a man who did not play by any rules at all. I stood there, my hand still resting on the polished wood of the service station, the heat of the tiny espresso cup fading memory against my skin. He had seen me. The realization was a cold stone in my stomach. Molly's warning, do not let him see you, was a frantic echo in my head. But it was too late. The curtain had been pulled back. In a single moment of foolish, desperate pride, I had torn down the invisible wall I had spent 4 years building. I was no longer furniture. I was a person. And in his world, people were either assets or liabilities. I was not sure which one was more dangerous. My shift ended at 3 a.m. The mezzanine was empty now, the heavy silence returning. But this time it was a hollow, empty quiet. Not the charged, electric silence of his presence. His party had left an hour ago. Caruso had not looked at me again. He had finished his espresso, conducted a low, quiet conversation with his men, and then stood. He moved with that same fluid grace, a panther in a bespoke suit. He left an obscene amount of cash on the table, a stack of $100 bills that Angelo had palmed with a shaky, reverent hand. I walked home. I did not take the bus. My cheap apartment in the East Side was a 40-minute walk, but I needed the cold night air to clear my head. The city was asleep. The streets cast in the watery orange glow of the streetlights, the fog rolled in from the river, damp and smelling of salt and exhaust. I clutched the strap of my bag, the weight of my microeconomics textbook a familiar burden on my shoulder. There was a new weight tonight, a small, square piece of cardboard tucked deep in my jeans pocket. A phone number, no name, embossed in gold. This was the inciting incident, the term my single English professor loved to use. The moment the protagonist is pushed from her normal life, I had always thought it was a dramatic, fictional concept. I was wrong. It felt like this. It felt like walking through your own neighborhood and suddenly seeing it as a stranger, as if you were already a ghost. It felt like your heart was beating too fast, a frantic bird trapped in your ribs, and you could not tell if it was from terror or a wild, terrifying hope. He was a mafia boss. I was not stupid. I knew what Giovanni's was. I knew who he was. The whispers in the kitchen, the hushed reverence, the way the police captain who ate there every Tuesday had nodded to him with deference. This was not a normal businessman. He did not have investments in the way my textbooks defined them. He had enterprises built on fear, on shadow, on things the law could never touch. And he had noticed me. I replayed the conversation 1,000 times, the air thick with cigar smoke and power, his voice, that smooth, educated baritone that held no hint of the streets. "You have any financial advice for me?" It had been a joke, a test, a bored lion swatting at a mouse to see if it would play dead. I had not played dead. I had talked about operational inefficiencies. I had talked about rounding errors. I had, for all intents and purposes, told one of the most dangerous men in the city that his organization was sloppy. I should have been terrified. A part of me was, a deep, cold, logical part of me was screaming to throw the card into the nearest sewer drain, quit my job at Giovanni's and disappear. But another part of me was shamefully, undeniably thrilled. He had not laughed at me. He had not dismissed me. He had listened. His men, especially the brute named Bruno, had looked at me with contempt. But Caruso, he had looked at me with something else. Calculation, interest. He had looked at me as if I was smart. No one at Giovanni's looked at me like I was smart. They looked at me as if I was a set of hands, a pair of legs to carry their wine. They talked over me, through me, around me. But Vincent Caruso had looked at me. I climbed the 5 flights of stairs to my apartment, my key scraping in the cheap lock. The small space was cold. I did not turn on the main light, just the small lamp on my desk. The desk was piled high with textbooks, with yellow legal pads covered in my own cramped, obsessive notes. My entire life was on that desk, a desperate, clawing climb out of the world I was born into, a plan. And then there was the card. I pulled it from my pocket and set it on top of my macroeconomics textbook. The black card was stark against the worn, dog-eared cover. This was the shock. This was the moment I realized my plan was a joke. I was trying to climb a ladder, rung by painful rung, taking on thousands in student debt to maybe get a junior analyst position in 10 years. I would be fetching coffee for the very men I served at Giovanni's, just in a different uniform. Vincent Caruso was not offering me a ladder. He was offering me an elevator. A dark, dangerous, high-speed elevator that probably went straight to hell. I sat there, just staring at the card. The dialogue replayed, a tense, magnetic loop, the way his gray eyes had pinned me, the way the air had crackled when I challenged him, when I said, but there was an attraction in that moment, a pull that I was ashamed to admit. It was not romantic. Not yet. It was the pull of intelligence recognizing intelligence. It was the pull of power. He had it. I wanted it. He saw that I wanted it, and he was amused by it. His initial belief that I was a joke, a fun diversion for his dinner, had vanished. I had seen it disappear. When I spoke about the numbers, when I advised him to check the activities in the companies he was invested in, the amusement had faded and something else had replaced it. Respect. A cold, analytical respect. But it was there. My seriousness, my stupid, reckless courage had made him pause. It had made him think. And then, the final, earth-shattering question. How would you feel about a job in finance? Grace, a real one, not just in a textbook. I had stood there, my mouth dry, my entire world tilting. I could not believe what I was hearing. It felt like a trap, another layer to his game. Sir, I had whispered, my voice failing me for the first time. It is a simple question, he had said, his voice dropping, becoming confidential, as if we were the only two people in the room. His men were silent, watching, their faces carved from stone. I need someone who can read a balance sheet without agenda. Someone who is not already part of the family, so to speak. Someone who sees the small percentages. He had looked right at me. I think that someone is you. My confusion must have been plain on my face. A Mafia boss was offering me a job. As his financial analyst, it was the most absurd, insane, terrifying thing that had ever happened to me. I had tried to backpedal. Mr. Caruso, I am a student. I am a waitress. I do not know anything about your business. You know numbers, he had stated, as if it were the only fact that mattered. You told me so yourself. Numbers do not lie. I am offering you a chance to work with numbers that matter. Numbers that change things. Not just exam scores. He had motioned to the room, to the opulence. This is a world you understand. You serve it, but you are not part of it. You see it for what it is. That makes you valuable. And then he had slid the card across the table. It had landed softly on the white linen. My office will call you tomorrow. If you are smart, you will answer. It was not a request. It was a command disguised as an offer. This was the true conflict, the true inciting incident. The joke he had made had become deadly serious. It had become a turning point that had just ripped my life in two. Before this night and after, I looked at the card on my desk. It was just a number, but it was a choice. I could throw it away, go back to my life, to the aching feet and the condescending patrons and the suffocating student debt. I could stick to the plan. I could be safe. Or I could answer the phone. I could step into the elevator. I could work for Vincent Caruso. I could use the knowledge I had bled for, not in a hypothetical classroom, but in the real world, a dark, dangerous world. Yes, this was my real introduction. This was the first real test. My hand was shaking, but I picked up the card. I knew, even then, that I was not going to throw it away. The girl from the East Side, the one who did her homework in the cold, was too ambitious. She was too angry. She was too hungry. This was not just a job offer. It was a dare. And I, God help me, had never been able to resist a dare. I answered the phone. The call came the next afternoon, precisely at 1 o'clock. I had been staring at the black card for hours, my heart a leaden, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I had not slept. The voice on the other end was female, smooth and utterly impersonal. She did not introduce herself. Mr. Caruso is expecting you at 4 o'clock. She gave me an address, a name, the Cypress Club. It was not a skyscraper. It was not a corporate headquarters. I knew the name. It was an old stone building in the financial district, a place with no sign, just a heavy oak door and a small brass plaque, a place where judges and billionaires dined, a place that required a membership key that cost more than my annual tuition. I quit my job at Giovanni's. Angelo, the maitre d', looked at me with a mixture of profound relief and raw terror when I told him I was leaving. He did not ask where I was going. He just nodded, his face pale. Good luck, Grace. He knew. He must have known. Molly was a different story. I met her for coffee, our last ritual, when I told her I was taking a job, a private financial position. She had looked at me with her sharp, knowing eyes. A private job? Grace from who? I could not lie to her. Not really. It is complicated. Moll, it is an opportunity. Opportunity, she repeated, her voice flat. Grace, he is a gangster. This is not an internship at Merrill Lynch. This is not a job. These people do not give you a retirement plan. They give you cement shoes. You cannot be this naive. I am not naive, I snapped. More harshly than I intended, the fear and exhaustion made me brittle. I am drowning, Molly. I am $40,000 in student debt to serve pasta to men who light their cigars with $100 bills. This is a chance. A real one. It is a trap, she whispered, grabbing my hand across the cheap Formica table. Please, Gracie, do not do this. But I had to. It was already done. The moment I spoke to him, the moment I saw that flicker of respect in his eyes, my path had diverted. I wore the only decent suit I owned, a black skirt and jacket, bought on clearance that I usually save for exams. The Cypress Club was silent inside. The floors were marble. The air smelled of old leather and beeswax. A man, who looked more like a tombstone than a person, directed me to an elevator. My interview was not an interview. It was an installation. The elevator opened into a penthouse study that overlooked the entire city. And there he was. Vincent Caruso. He was not in a suit. He wore dark trousers and a simple, perfectly fitted gray cashmere sweater. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a private equity king. He was standing by a window that stretched from the floor to the ceiling. You are punctual, he said, turning. His gray eyes swept over me. That is good. He gestured to a desk in the corner. It was not a desk. It was a command center. Multiple screens showed market data, news feeds, and what looked like encrypted internal dashboards. This is your station, Doa, he said. There was no small talk. No, tell me about yourself. He already knew. I realized with a cold certainty that he had probably run a full background check on me before he had even finished his espresso. He knew about my student debt. He knew about my mother. He knew what I studied. Your first task, he said. Moving to one of the screens, he brought up a series of ledgers. This is one of my import businesses. It is legitimate, mostly. A small, cold smile. But it is leaking. You spoke of small percentages. Show me. And just like that, I was in... My life split in two. There was the life I had left, the world of Molly and night classes and aching feet, and then there was this. I did not go home. A car, a sleek black sedan with windows so dark I could not see the driver, took me to a new apartment. Mr. Caruso has arranged it, the driver said. It was a high-rise on the waterfront, a place with a doorman and a view of the harbor. It was sterile, beautiful, and felt nothing like home. It was a golden cage. My days were spent in that silent study, or sometimes in a windowless, secure office in the back of the import company's warehouse. I was given access codes. I was given raw data. I was a ghost in his machine. And I was good at it. I found the leaks. I found them in the first 3 days. The rounding errors I had so bravely mentioned at Giovanni's were not errors at all. They were a systematic, careful theft, a supervisor in the shipping department, a manager in accounting, a few $1,000s here, 10,000 there, siphoned off through ghost employees and falsified invoices. It was clever, but I was more clever. I compiled my report. I did not just show the numbers. I created a flowchart. I showed the pattern. I showed where the money was going. I presented it to him on a Friday night in that same penthouse study. He sat in a large leather chair, and I stood before him, like a student defending a thesis. His men were there. Bruno, the man with the broken nose and the dead eyes, stood by the door, his arms crossed, his face a mask of bored contempt. When I finished, there was silence. Bruno was the first to speak, his voice a low growl. So, what a couple of dock rats are skimming. We handle it. Why are we wasting the boss's time with this... a school project? He looked at me, dismissing me. You are done, girl. Go home. My blood ran cold, but I did not move. I looked at Caruso. Caruso had not taken his eyes off the screen. She's not done. he said quietly. Bruno, you see skimming. She sees a structural weakness. They were not skimming. They were testing the system. See here. He pointed to my flowchart. The amounts were increasing. 5%, then 8, then 10. They were getting bolder. They were preparing for something bigger. He looked at me. Who were they afraid of? Grace. I swallowed. This was the part my textbooks had not prepared me for. They were not afraid of you. I said, the system they built, it was designed to hide the theft from a standard audit, not from a forensic one. They were afraid of an accountant, but they were not afraid of you. That means they thought you would not look, or that they were protected by someone you trust. Bruno went rigid. His contempt vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp vigilance. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it. He did not just dislike me. He saw me as a threat. Very good, Grace, Caruso said, his voice smooth as velvet. Bruno, you will handle the supervisor and the manager, quietly. Bruno nodded, his eyes still on me. And her? She stays, Caruso said. She has her next project. That was the beginning. The tension ratcheted up every day. I was pulled deeper, out of the legitimate businesses and into the gray areas, the shell corporations, the offshore holdings, the development projects that were clearly just fronts to wash money. I was using every skill I had learned, not to build a future, but to polish a criminal empire. And the rewards were intoxicating. My salary was a number I had never dreamed of. A clothing allowance appeared in my new bank account. You are my associate now. Grace, he had told me, his eyes appraising my clearance rack suit. You will look the part. I was taken to meetings, secret meetings in the back rooms of places like Giovanni's, or in private suites at hotels, or on quiet, idling yachts. I was the silent girl in the corner with the laptop, the one they called Caruso's numbers girl. I sat in rooms with men who had violence simmering just beneath their calm exteriors. I listened to them discuss territories, rivals, and negotiations. I took notes. I analyzed the financial impact of their business decisions. Bruno's hostility grew with every passing day. He saw me as an infection, an outsider who had somehow bypassed the hierarchy. He resented my access to Caruso. He resented the way the boss listened to me. He cornered me one evening in the concrete hallway of the warehouse office. You think you are smart, he hissed, blocking my path. He smelled of cheap cigars. You are a waitress, a toy. He will get bored of you. I am just doing my job, Bruno, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, my back pressed against the cold wall. Your job, he said, stepping closer, is what I say it is, and I say you are done. You are digging into things that are not your concern. You keep digging. You might just fall into a hole you cannot climb out of. Understand. The threat was naked, unmistakable. Before I could answer, Caruso's voice echoed down the hall. Bruno. It was just his name, but it cut through the air and stopped Bruno cold. He turned, his face shifting instantly from menace to deference. Caruso walked toward us, his footsteps silent on the concrete. He did not look at Bruno. He looked at me. Is there a problem? No, boss, Bruno said, stepping back. Just welcoming the new girl. I will handle her welcome, Caruso said, his voice dropping, becoming lethally soft. She is with me. You will not speak to her again unless I am present. Is that clear? Yes, boss, Bruno said. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of hatred. Then he turned and walked away. I was shaking. I could not stop. Caruso stood in front of me. He did not move to comfort me. He just watched me. He will not touch you, he said. It was not a reassurance. It was a statement of fact. Why? I whispered, the word escaping me. Why am I here? Vincent, I am not one of you. I had never used his first name. It slipped out. He did not seem to notice, or if he did not care. He studied my face, his gray eyes intense. No, he said. You are not. You are better. You are loyal. Not because you are afraid, but because the numbers demand it. You are precise. And you are not compromised. Not yet. He raised a hand, and I flinched. He stopped, his hand hovering in the air between us. He did not touch me. He just tucked a strand of hair that had escaped my bun behind my ear. His fingers barely brushed my skin, but a jolt went through me, sharp and hot. "I'm in a forest of liars, Grace," he murmured. His voice for me alone. "Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle, but you just want the truth. You want the equation to balance. I respect that." I looked up at him. My breath caught in my throat. This was the man who had people handled. This was a killer, a criminal. But the way he looked at me, the intelligence in his gaze, the undeniable pull, it was terrifying. I was not just afraid of him. I was drawn to him. This cold, brilliant, dangerous man who saw my mind, not my apron. "Do not be afraid of him," he said, his gaze dropping to my mouth. "He is a dog that barks. You should be afraid of me. I am the one who bites." He smiled, a slow, predatory smile. "Go home, Grace. We have a busy day tomorrow. We are acquiring a bank." I walked out of that warehouse, my legs unsteady. I was trapped. I was involved in crimes I could not even name. I was a target for his enemies and his own men. And I, Grace Delaney, the girl who just wanted a future, was falling for the one man who could destroy it all. The rising action was not just in his business. It was in my heart, and I did not know how to stop it. The bank acquisition was not an acquisition, it was a dissection. For 2 weeks, I lived in the penthouse study, often sleeping for 2 or 3 hours on a leather couch that cost more than my college tuition. I did not just analyze the bank's assets. Vincent had me analyzing its soul. I tracked its weakest links, its most pliable executives, its most compromised accounts. I was not just finding a way in. I was building a blueprint for a hostile takeover, not with stock, but with leverage. Vincent was there most nights. He would sit across from me, not speaking, just reading. Sometimes he read ancient philosophy, sometimes modern market theory, but I could always feel his attention, a low, steady thrum in the quiet room. The attraction that had sparked in the warehouse had not been spoken of, but it was a living thing between us. It was in the way he would hand me a cup of coffee, his fingers brushing mine. It was in the way I would look up from my screen and find him watching me, his gray eyes dark and unreadable. It was a dangerous, silent understanding. I was digging deep into the bank's offshore transfer system, looking for the vulnerabilities he could exploit. When I found it, it was not a leak, it was a void, a black hole. My blood turned to ice. My textbooks had theories for this, but seeing it in the wild was something else. I was tracing a series in Vincent's own network, checking the cash flow he would use to begin the buyout. I was running a diagnostic, a simple validation of his liquid assets. And a sum was missing, a very, very large sum. Not a rounding error. This was 9 figures, $100 million. At first, I thought it was a complex firewall, a part of his system I had not been given access to. I checked the ledgers he had provided. The money was there. I checked the bank statements. The money was there. But when I ran a real-time trace on the holding corporation, the account was empty. The money had been moved. Not yesterday, but in a series of 82 transactions over the past 6 months. The ledgers I was looking at, they were fake. Someone had created a perfect parallel set of books, a mirror image of his finances, just for me, to keep me busy, to make me think everything was stable. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was not a test. This was a coup. The theft was brilliant. It was patient. It was designed by someone who knew his systems inside and out, someone who knew he was acquiring a new asset, someone who knew a new analyst me would be focused on the new target, not the old ones. I began to dig, my fingers flying across the keyboard, the adrenaline singing in my veins. I bypassed the terminal Vincent had given me and hacked directly into the building's server, using the administrator passwords I had memorized weeks ago. I needed the raw data, not the curated version I had been fed. I found the real transfers. The money was being routed, split, and washed through a dizzying series of shell companies in jurisdictions that did not exist on any map I knew, but the thief had made one mistake: the final destination. It was a single, heavily encrypted account. It took me an hour to crack the encryption. It was not a name. It was a holding company. B.G. Enterprises. B.G. Bruno? My breath hitched. Bruno, the man who hated me, the man who had threatened me. He was not just a brute. He was smart. He was patient. He was stealing Vincent Caruso blind, building his own empire with his boss's money. The rounding errors I had found at the import company, that was just practice. That was him testing the system, testing me. And when I had reported it, I had unknowingly signed my own death warrant. I had proven I was a threat to him. I sat back, the air in the penthouse suddenly too thin. I looked at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m. Vincent was not here. He was at a dinner meeting. What did I do? I was holding a grenade. Bruno was not just an enforcer. He was one of them. He was family. I was the outsider, the numbers girl. Who would Vincent believe? I thought of Molly, run, Gracie. But I could not run. He had put me in this position. He had trusted me. And more than that, I was angry. Bruno had underestimated me. He had treated me like a little waitress bitch. He had built a wall, and I was about to tear it down. I did not wait. I printed everything. The real transfer logs, the fake ledgers, the offshore account numbers. I created a new flowchart, not one of business, but of betrayal. I laid it all out on the massive mahogany desk. Vincent arrived at 3:30. I heard the private elevator ding. He walked in, shrugging off his heavy overcoat. He looked tired, but his eyes sharpened when he saw me. Still working? Grace. His voice was low, laced with that same dangerous charm. You need to sleep. I cannot, I said. My voice was hoarse. He stopped, his hand on the knot of his tie. He saw my face. He saw the papers on his desk. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by that lethal, absolute focus. What is it? He asked. You told me to look for inefficiencies, I said, my hands clasped in front of me to stop them from shaking. This is not an inefficiency. This is not a leak. It is a siphon, a deliberate, systematic hole in your organization. I pointed to the papers. You are being betrayed. He did not move. He stood there, a statue of tailored wool and controlled power. By who? The ledgers you gave me for the bank acquisition. They were clean, too clean. They were fakes. His eyes narrowed. That was all. Just a slight, dangerous narrowing of his eyes. Someone has been mirroring your books, feeding me old data, while they emptied the primary accounts. $100 million. Vincent gone. He walked to the desk. He did not look at me. He looked at the flow charts. He looked at the account numbers. He picked up the final sheet, the one with the name of the holding company. B. Enterprises, he said, his voice terrifyingly soft. Bruno, I whispered. The silence that followed was the most violent thing I had ever experienced. The air in the room became brittle, pressurized. I could almost hear the glass shattering. He did not yell. He did not swear. He just stood there, his back to me, looking at the evidence of his oldest friend's betrayal. He used me, I said, the realization hitting me. He used my presence. He knew you had me focused on the bank. He accelerated the transfers, using my due diligence as a smokescreen. Vincent turned, very slowly. His face was a mask of cold, chiseled marble. The charm was gone. The warmth was gone. This was not the man who had tucked my hair behind my ear. This was the boss, the killer. Yes, he said. He did. He looked at me, his gaze so intense it burned. You were not afraid to bring this to me. I was, I said honestly. I am, but I work for you, and the numbers do not lie. He stared at me for a long moment, as if he was seeing me for the first time. Then he nodded. A sharp, definitive gesture. You did well, Grace. Stay here. Do not move from this room. He walked to the intercom on his desk. "Send Bruno up, now." My heart leaped into my throat. "Here now. Vincent, he is dangerous. He will know I was the one who— Stay. Here," he commanded, his voice iron. He walked to the window and stood, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the sleeping city. 10 minutes later, the elevator chimed. Bruno walked in. He was wearing his usual black suit, his face set in its normal, bored, arrogant lines. He saw me standing by the desk and his lip curled in a sneer. "Boss," he said, nodding to Vincent's back. "What, the girl make a math mistake needs me to scare her straight?" "I have a question for you, Bruno," Vincent said, his voice still quiet, not turning. "Anything, boss, you know that." "BG Enterprises." Bruno froze. It was the only word for it. His entire body went rigid, the color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, gray pallor. His eyes darted to me, and the look in them was not just hatred, it was pure, unadulterated murder. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said, his voice a low growl. "Do not lie to me," Vincent said. He turned from the window. His face was calm, but his eyes were black. "You have been with me for 20 years. I have given you everything, and you have been stealing from me, from your family, from me, for 6 months." "It was not—" Bruno started, his hand inching toward the inside of his jacket. "It was business. You got soft, boss. You got distracted." His eyes flicked to me again. "With this, with banks, with waitresses. You forgot what we are. I did not." "What we are, Bruno, is loyal. You are not. You are just a common thief." "Thief!" Bruno's voice rose, cracking with rage. "I did your dirty work. I built this city for you while you sat in your tower reading books. And what do I get replaced by a kid who knows how to use a calculator?" He moved. He was fast, faster than I could have imagined. But he did not go for Vincent. He came for me. He lunged across the desk, scattering the papers, and grabbed me by the hair. He yanked me back, spinning me around, and in the same motion, his gun was out, the cold steel pressed hard against my temple. "Bruno!" Vincent roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice. It was like thunder. "Stop!" Bruno screamed, his voice high and frantic. He was sweating, his eyes wild. He dragged me toward the elevator, his arm a steel band around my throat, the gun barrel digging into my skin. "Call your men off. Tell them to stand down, or I swear to God, boss, I will spray her brains all over your expensive carpet." Vincent stood by his desk, his hands raised slightly. He was calm again, but it was the calm of a caged panther. "Let her go. Bruno, she has nothing to do with this. This is between you and me." "She has everything to do with this," Bruno shrieked, mashing the elevator button with his elbow. "You hesitated. I saw it. You care about the girl." He laughed, a high, strangled sound. "After all these years, you finally found a weakness." The elevator doors dinged open. Bruno dragged me in, his body shielding mine. He kept the gun to my head. "Stand down, me," Vincent said into his intercom, his voice cold. "Let him pass. All units, stand down." Bruno laughed again as the doors began to slide shut. "Smartest man in the world, boss. But you are still just a man." The doors closed, and we were alone, plunging downward. You stupid bitch," Bruno hissed in my ear, his breath hot and sour. "You could have had everything. Oh, you could have worked for me. But you had to be loyal." My mind was racing, and he was taking me to the garage. He was going to kill me. He was going to put me in the trunk of a car, and I would never be seen again. I was terrified, my entire body shaking so hard I could barely stand. But I was also furious. I was not a waitress. I was not a toy. I was the person who had found him out. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto the concrete expanse of the private garage. It was silent, vast, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. He dragged me toward a black sedan. His steps hurried. He was desperate. "Get in!" he snarled, shoving me toward the passenger door. He was distracted, and he was fumbling for his keys, his eyes darting toward the elevator, expecting Vincent's men to come at any second. His grip on my arm loosened for just a fraction of a second. I used my brain. I did not fight him. I used the system he had ignored. I took a deep breath and I screamed. Not a scream of terror, but a command. Code red, lockdown, code red. Bruno looked at me, confused. What? A deafening klaxon began to blare. Heavy steel security gates slammed down over the garage entrance and exit, the sound of grinding metal echoing in the concrete space. Red lights began to flash, bathing the garage in a pulsating, hellish glow. He understood. He realized what I had done. I had seen the emergency protocols in the building's security system. I had triggered a full containment. We were trapped. "You," he roared, his face purple with rage. He raised the gun, not to my head, but to my chest. He was going to kill me right here. I stumbled back, falling over a concrete parking stop, and landed hard on the ground. The elevator dinged. Bruno spun around, the door slid open. Vincent stood there. He was not alone. Two of his men, not the ones from Giovanni's, but two hard, silent men I had seen in the bank meetings, flanked him. Bruno raised his gun, but he was too slow. There was no gunfire. They moved like shadows, disarming him in a swift, brutal, silent series of movements. One man shattered Bruno's wrist, the gun clattering to the concrete. The other one hit him in the throat, and Bruno crumpled to his knees, gagging. It was over in 3 seconds. The alarms were still screaming. I was on the ground, my hands scraped and raw, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. Vincent walked toward me. He did not rush. He looked at Bruno, who was now being held by the two men, and his face was utterly devoid of emotion. He kicked the gun away. He stopped in front of me and looked down. He pulled a phone from his pocket and pressed a button. The alarms stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. "Code red," he said, his voice almost conversational in the quiet garage. "Very smart, Grace." He held out his hand. I took it. His grip was strong and warm. He pulled me to my feet in one smooth motion. I was shaking, and I could not stop. "You're bleeding," he said. I looked down. My elbow was scraped raw from the fall. I had not even felt it. He looked at Bruno, who was glaring at him with pure, murderous hatred. "Take him to the river house," and Vincent said to his men. "I will be there in an hour. I want to talk to him at length." The men nodded, dragging the silent, defeated Bruno back into the elevator. Vincent turned back to me. He put his hand on my shoulder, a heavy, possessive weight. "Let's go upstairs," he said, his voice softening. "Just slightly. You need a drink, and I need you to look at these bank statements one more time. We have a lot of work to do." He was already back to business, the betrayal processed, the threat neutralized, and I, somehow, was still by his side. The elevator ride back up to the penthouse was silent. The harsh fluorescent lights of the garage were gone, replaced by the soft, warm glow of the elevator's antique brass fittings. I was acutely aware of his hand still resting on my elbow, a gesture that was half support, half possession. I was still shaking, a deep, internal tremor that started in my knees and radiated outward. The adrenaline from the garage, the primal terror of the gun against my head, I was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. We stepped out into the study. The room was exactly as we had left it. The papers I had printed, the evidence of Bruno's betrayal, were still scattered across the mahogany desk. It looked like a storm had passed through, which I supposed it had. Vincent released my arm and walked to the bar, his movements as unhurried as if he were returning from a mundane meeting. He did not look at the mess. He did not look at me. He just poured a generous amount of amber liquid into 2 heavy crystal glasses. He walked over to me and pressed one of the glasses into my hand. My fingers were so cold they barely registered the shape of it. "Drink," he commanded. It was not a suggestion. I drank. The scotch was smoky and impossibly smooth, but it burned a trail down my throat, a welcome, grounding fire. He watched me, his gray eyes clinical, assessing. "You are hurt," he stated, nodding at my elbow. I had forgotten. I looked down. The sleeve of my jacket was torn, and the raw scrape beneath was oozing blood, a dark stain on the expensive wool. It was a stupid, mundane injury after staring down the barrel of a gun. He gestured to the leather couch. "Sit." I sat, the glass clutched in my lap. He disappeared into an adjoining bathroom and returned a moment later with a small, leather-bound first aid kit. He knelt in front of me, a man in a $5,000 suit kneeling on his penthouse carpet. He took the glass from my unresisting hand and set it on the coffee table. He rolled up my sleeve with an impersonal, efficient touch. His fingers were warm against my cold skin. He took a small antiseptic wipe and began to clean the wound. I flinched. A sharp hiss of air. The sting was sharp. Real. "It will be fine," he said, his voice low. He did not look at my face, but kept his focus on his task. A scrape, nothing more. His calmness was more unnerving than his anger would have been. He had just condemned a man, his friend of 20 years, to a fate I did not want to imagine. And now he was calmly applying a bandage to my elbow as if he were a doctor. I found my voice. It was a reedy, unfamiliar whisper. "The river house. What? What is that?" He pressed the final piece of tape down on the bandage, his touch precise. He did not answer for a long moment. He cleaned up the small wrappers, placing them neatly back in the kit. "It is a place for difficult conversations," he said at last, his voice devoid of any emotion. He stood up, looking down at me. "It is a place where we ensure the organization remains clean." The euphemism hung in the air, cold and heavy as a shroud. He was a master of sanitation. He was about to perform the ultimate act of corporate restructuring. He was going to eliminate the traitor. A traitor I had found. He picked up his own glass from the bar and drained it in one swallow. He put the glass down with a decisive clink. "I have to leave," he said. He walked to the hall closet and retrieved his overcoat, the same one he had taken off not even an hour ago. "I will be back in a few hours. I have to speak with Bruno." He turned to me, his hand on the door. "You will not leave this penthouse. The elevator is locked to this floor. The men outside the door will not let you pass. You are safe here, but you are not to leave." "I am a prisoner," I said, the words tasting like ash. "You are an asset," he corrected me, his gray eyes unblinking. "And you have proven to be far too valuable to be left unguarded, especially now." He left. The heavy door shut with a quiet, final thud. The deadbolt, an electronic one, snapped into place with a sharp, metallic sound. I was alone. I sat on that leather couch for what felt like a lifetime. The initial shock gave way to a creeping, suffocating numbness. I was not just an employee. I was not just a consultant. I was a target. I was a catalyst. I had just triggered a purge. The silence of the penthouse was overwhelming. I looked around the room at the priceless art, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire sleeping city spread out before me like a carpet of diamonds. This was the world I had wanted to understand, the world of power and finance, and I was finally seeing it, not from the service entrance, but from the throne room. I thought about Bruno, his wild eyes, the cold steel of the gun, the pure, murderous hatred aimed at me, because I was smart, because I was precise, because I had seen what he had hidden. The hours ticked by. I did not cry, I did not panic, I just sat, the unsipped scotch slowly warming on the table. My mind was racing, replaying not just the garage, but my entire life. My old life, Molly, my tiny, cold apartment, my textbooks. I got up and walked to the desk. I picked up one of the scattered papers, my own flow chart, the one that had condemned a man. The lines were neat, the logic undeniable. The numbers did not lie. I had been so proud of that. I had been proud of my mind. But my mind, my ambition, had led me here. It had led me to a gilded cage where I was waiting for a Mafia boss to return from a conversation. I had choices. I knew I did. When he returned, I could demand to leave. I could take the money I had earned and disappear. I could try to go back to my old life, to my night classes, to my dream of a cubicle on Wall Street. But the thought was hollow. Go back. How? How could I go back to studying hypothetical market theories when I just lived through a hostile, lethal takeover of a different kind? How could I sit in a classroom, listening to a professor drone on about risk management, when I just looked into the eyes of a man about to kill me? And how could I ever feel safe? I knew what Bruno knew. I knew about the bank. I knew about the shell corporations. I knew about the real, ugly mechanics of Vincent Caruso's empire. I was not a waitress he had flirted with. I was his analyst. I was a walking, talking liability. He was right. I was valuable. And I was dangerous. I was no longer an outsider. That was the simple, terrifying truth. The moment I had accepted his card at Giovanni's, the moment I had taken his money and his apartment, I had crossed a line tonight. I had not just crossed it. I had burned the bridge behind me. I had helped him purge his own organization. I was a part of his life now, whether I wanted to be or not. The sky was turning a bruised, watery purple when I heard the ding of the elevator. I stood, my heart suddenly hammering again. The door opened. Vincent walked in. He looked exactly the same. His suit was immaculate. His hair was perfect. He was not disheveled. He was not spattered in blood. He just looked tired. A deep, profound tiredness was etched around his eyes. He shrugged off his overcoat and hung it in the closet. He walked to the bar, loosened his tie, and began to pour himself another drink. "Is he a—" I could not finish the sentence. "It is handled," he said, his back to me. "The organization is clean. All of Bruno's associates have been, reassigned. The 100 million will be back in our accounts by noon." It was handled. The finality of it chilled me to the bone. He had just ripped out a 20-year-old piece of his own foundation and spoke about it like he had closed a bad account. He turned, glass in hand, and looked at me. He studied my face. The fear and exhaustion I knew must be written there. "You are still here," he said. It was not a question. "You locked me in." "I did," he agreed, "and now I am unlocking the door." He took a sip of his drink. "You have a choice, Grace. You can take a severance, a very large one. I will have you flown to any country you choose. You will have a new name, a new life, and you will never, ever come back." My breath hitched. He was offering me an out. "Or," he said, walking closer, "you can stay." "Stay," I whispered, "and do what keep finding traitors for you. You will do what you do best," he said, stopping just a foot in front of me. "You will make the organization stronger." Bruno was right about one thing. I was distracted. My systems were old. My trust was misplaced. He created a vacuum. I need someone to fill it. "You want me to be your Bruno?" I asked, horrified. "No," he said, his voice dropping. "I have men who can handle the river house. I want you to be my mind. I want you to be the one who sees the patterns. I want you to sit at my side, not as an analyst, but as my partner. I want you to run the numbers, and I will handle the operations. Together, we will be impenetrable." This was it, the final choice, the normal life, or this. I looked at him, at this killer, this brilliant, cold, and undeniably magnetic man. He was offering me exactly what I had always wanted, just wrapped in darkness. He was offering me power. He was offering me a place at the table. My old life was gone. I had known that since I sat on the couch, waiting for him, that Grace was a ghost, this new life. It was terrifying. It was a career built on crime. It was an emotional minefield because my feelings for this man were so tangled with fear and attraction, I could not tell them apart. I thought about my values. I thought about my mother. And then I thought about the man who had dismissed me as a waitress bitch. I made my decision. "I am a terrible analyst," I said, my voice shaking but gaining strength. "I missed what he was doing for weeks." A small, slow smile touched Vincent's lips. It was the first sign of warmth I had seen since he had left. "Then you will get better," he said. Your first task is to restructure the entire financial side. I want a system so secure that not even I can steal from it without you knowing." He held out his hand. "Do we have a deal, Grace?" My life was changed forever. My career was not on Wall Street. It was here, in this penthouse, with him. My new challenge was not to get a degree, but to stay alive, to stay in control, and to manage the finances of an empire. I looked at his outstretched hand. I thought about what I really wanted, and I realized, with a shock, that this was it. I placed my hand in his. "We have a deal, Mr. Caruso." He did not let go of my hand. His grip was firm, a binding contract of flesh and bone. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. "Vincent," he said, his voice low, "if you are to be my partner, you will call me by my name." I met his gaze. The exhaustion from the night, the terror from the garage, it was all still there. But a new, cold clarity was cutting through it. I had just agreed to step into the abyss, but I would not do it as a servant. I had leverage. I had just saved him $100 million and neutralized his greatest internal threat. I slid my hand from his. He let it go. "I have a condition," I said. His gray eyes, which had softened slightly, sharpened again. He was not a man who was given conditions. He was the one who set them. "Oh," he asked, a dangerous, quiet amusement in his voice. "I will run your finances. I will build your new system. I will make your empire impenetrable," I said, my voice gaining strength. "But I will continue my education. I will get my degree. I will get my master's. I will do it on my time, and your organization will accommodate it. My work for you will be absolute, but my mind remains my own." I expected him to argue. I expected him to tell me that my life was his now, that my school was this penthouse. He surprised me. He studied my face for a long moment, as if he was seeing me clearly for the first time since that night at Giovanni's. The small, slow smile I had seen only once before, the one of genuine appreciation, touched his lips. "You really do not understand," he murmured, almost to himself. "Do you?" "Understand what? Why I chose you," he said. "Grace, I did not hire you because you are obedient. I hired you because you are not. I hired you for your mind. Why would I ever want you to stop sharpening it?" He walked to the window, looking at the emerging dawn. "Your school, your classes, your degrees, they are non-negotiable. They are an asset to the organization. You will have whatever resources you need, a private tutor, a new university, whatever you require, it is done." And just like that, the new terms were set. My life changed. It did not just change, it was demolished and rebuilt from the foundation up. I moved out of the sterile high-rise and into the penthouse. "It is more efficient," Bahi had said, "and you are more secure here." He was not wrong. I spent the next 6 months in a state of controlled, focused fury. I worked with a precision I never knew I possessed. I tore down Vincent's entire financial structure, a system built on decades of handshake deals, messy ledgers, and misplaced trust. I rebuilt it. I used encrypted blockchain ledgers for his legitimate businesses. I created a labyrinth of offshore shell corporations so complex that I was the only one who held the map. I automated his cash flows. I designed dashboards that showed me every single dollar that moved from every corner of his empire in real time. I did not just plug the leak, I turned his finances into a fortress. And Vincent, he watched. He gave me absolute authority. Men who had been with him for 30 years, men with hard faces and harder reputations, now had to come through me. "Ask the numbers, girl," he would say. And it was final. The contempt they had for me, the same contempt Bruno had, slowly turned into a palpable, grudging fear. I was not just the boss's pet. I was the one who signed their checks. I was the one who could find their discrepancies. Our relationship evolved. It was no longer boss and employee. The late nights working over spreadsheets turned into quiet dinners in the penthouse. We would sit in silence, him reading his philosophy, me analyzing European markets. But it was a shared silence, comfortable, charged. The attraction that had simmered between us, the one that had sparked in the warehouse and solidified in the garage, was a constant, unspoken presence. He was a complex, dangerous man. I never forgot what he was. I never forgot what had happened at the River House, but I also saw the man who read Latin texts before bed, the man who could discuss geopolitical economic theory with a brilliance that left me breathless, the man who, despite his absolute power, treated my mind as his equal. The respect came first, the love that followed, slowly, cautiously, like a flower growing through concrete. It was not a gentle love. It was possessive. It was demanding. It was the love of two people who saw the world for exactly what it was, a dark, brutal place where you needed to be smarter and stronger than everyone else. He would stop me in the middle of a work session, his hand on my shoulder, and just look at me. "You are the only person in this organization who does not fear me," he said one night, his voice a low rumble. "I am terrified of you," I replied honestly, not looking up from my screen. "But I respect the numbers more, and the numbers say you are making a mistake on this shipping merger." He had laughed, a real deep laugh, and that, I realized, was our language. The plot twist, when it came, was not a betrayal. It was a revelation. I was finalizing my enrollment for my last semester, the one that would finally give me my degree. I was logged into my old, forgotten student loan portal, the one that held the $40,000 debt that had once felt like a mountain. I was preparing to pay it off in one satisfying, vindictive keystroke. But the balance was zero. I blinked, confused. I refreshed the page. Balance $0.00. I frowned. I dug deeper. The loan had been paid in full. A single lump sum payment. I checked the date. It was dated 6 months ago, the day after I had accepted his job. My heart started to hammer, a slow, deep drum. I pulled up my college tuition account. My fees for the last 2 semesters, which I had assumed were being deferred, had also been paid, not by me, by an anonymous educational benefactor grant. I stared at the name. I had seen it before. It was a shell corporation, one that I had set up for him 3 months ago for his charitable donations. He had been paying for everything, from the beginning, before Bruno, before I had proven myself, before I had saved him a single dollar. He had paid off my chains before I even knew I was working for him. I walked out of the study and into the main living area. He was standing by the window, a phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp and commanding. He was in the middle of a difficult conversation, one involving a problem at the docks. "What is it?" he said, sensing my presence. I did not say anything. I just stood there, holding the tablet with my tuition statement on the screen. He looked at me, then at the tablet. His eyes met mine. His expression did not change, but he ended his call. "I will handle it later," he said, and hung up. "You paid my loans." I said. It was not a question. He was silent for a moment. He turned fully to me. "It was a business expense, an investment in a key asset." "No," I said, my voice shaking. I was not angry. I was, undone. "You paid it the day after I met you. I was not an asset. I was a waitress who had served you coffee. I had done nothing for you." "You had," he said, his voice quiet, intense. "You had looked me in the eye. You had told me the truth. In my world, that is not nothing. It is everything." I felt the hot sting of tears, and I hated myself for it. "Why did you not tell me? Why let me think I was working to pay this off?" He stepped closer, his face softening, losing the hard edges of the boss and becoming just a man. "Because I needed you to stay, Grace. But I needed you to stay because you chose to, not because I bought you, not because you were indebted to me. I took the debt away so that the only thing keeping you here was me and your own ambition." He had freed me in secret, just to see if I would choose his cage. This was his love language, not flowers, not poetry, but the silent, ruthless removal of obstacles. He had seen the one chain that tied me to my old life, the $40,000 shackle that kept me terrified. And he had simply broken it. I crossed the space between us and kissed him. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss from our past. It was a kiss of full, complete understanding. It was a kiss of equals. He had respected my mind, but he had also seen my burden. Our relationship was not simple. It was a constant negotiation of power, of darkness and light. I ran his legitimate empire, making it grow. I kept the dirty money clean. I was his firewall, his planner, and his partner. He was my protector, my mentor, and the man who, despite his darkness, saw the light in me and guarded it. We did not have a large wedding. It was not safe, and it was not us. It was a cold, clear day in December. 1 year after that night at Giovanni's, we stood on the rooftop of the penthouse, the city spread out below us like our own personal kingdom. A quiet, visibly nervous city judge performed the ceremony. The only witnesses were his two most trusted men, the same two who had been in the garage. They were my security detail now. I did not wear a white dress. I wore a deep blue suit, tailored to perfection, as sharp as his. Vincent took my hands. His were warm. He wore a simple, dark charcoal suit, reminiscent of the one he had worn the night we met. His gray eyes were not cold. They were clear, and they were focused only on me. In this life, Grace, he said, ignoring the judge, his voice for me alone. There are no guarantees. There is only loyalty, and there are numbers. You are the only person I have ever met who understands both. To have and to hold, the judge murmured, rushing the words. Vincent slid a ring onto my finger. It was not a large diamond. It was a solid, heavy, platinum band, with a single, flawless blue diamond set within it, almost hidden, a secret, just for me. I do, I said. I do, he replied. And that was it. We were married. Grace Caruso. The judge signed the papers with a shaky hand and practically ran to the elevator. Vincent smiled, a true, relaxed smile. He pulled me close, his hand in my hair. Mrs. Caruso, he said, you have your work cut out for you. Our new shipping projections just came in. They will have to wait, I said, putting my arms around his neck. I believe we have a 20% operational inefficiency in our honeymoon schedule. He laughed, a deep, happy sound that echoed out over the city. I was no longer the waitress. I was no longer an outsider. I was home, in the most dangerous, complicated, and perfect place I could ever be. I had found my place, not in the light I thought I wanted, but in the intelligent, powerful, and loving darkness of his world. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let us know. It is amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button. It helps more than you know and lets us bring more stories like this to you.